Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another round of sound. This is the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. I'm Bob Pompeani, and as always, we have a lot to get into tonight. We'll talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are hot right now. How hot are they? What will they need to do going down the stretch? Will they make another trade? Who's their biggest opposition? We'll talk about that. Kevin Colbert made some interesting comments this week about his quarterback situation. The Astros scandal continues to be out there and a lot of debate about it. But the #1 topic tonight on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown will be Myles Garrett versus Mason Rudolph. And here's your panel left to right on your television screen. We have three of the best with us. Colin Dunlap from the Fan Morning Show to the far left. In the middle is Josh Yohe, who does a great job covering the Penguins with The Athletic. Mr. Tim Benz to the right, TribLive.com, and the Steelers pregame show on DVE. So we're talking about Myles Garrett, who, interestingly enough, Colin, did not make this an issue at all the night of the event. He did not make it an issue at all the rest of that week. Not until he went to the appeals process trying to lessen his penalty did he bring up a racial slur, and now he's doubling down on it. #1, what should happen to him moving forward if it's proven that he is just making up or perpetrating a hoax?
Well, his suspension should be elongated. I think the whole game has changed now that Mike Tomlin has entered the vortex. Not only did Mike Tomlin do it in the offseason, Mike Tomlin, when you look at this, was a guy that waited and waited and waited to say something. He now does it. And also, let's not get past the fact that Mike Tomlin is a very high-ranking and powerful black man in the National Football League. And he essentially and pretty much forthright called Myles Garrett a liar with his statement the other day. That speaks volumes. It's not just a guy having the back of a guy on his team. It's a guy making a definitive statement that someone is sullying the name of the league, sullying the name of that shield, and doing something that's just not above board. And a fellow African-American, this is a big, big deal that Mike Tomlin said something.
Bob, I'll go back to the point that you brought up on the toss to Colin there. I'm going to seize on what you asked about what his suspension should be. I said and wrote back when he first made the allegation that he should have been suspended twice, once for the helmet swing and once for making the allegation when it couldn't be corroborated. And I wrote again on Friday that there should have been a condition of his reinstatement that Myles Garrett should not be allowed to speak about the racial slur again, because all he is doing now is defaming another player within the league. And on top of that, he essentially went so far as to accuse the National Football League of a cover-up by suggesting that they have audio that they're not releasing. So not only is he continuing to smear another player within the union, he is also accusing the league of lying to cover up, which is ironic to me because Myles Garrett is a Defensive Player of the Year candidate every time he's on the field. Mason Rudolph is a backup quarterback who lost his job to a duck caller this year. So why would the NFL try to cover up for Mason Rudolph and continue to make Myles Garrett look bad? It's ridiculous.
I agree with both of you wholeheartedly. And Colin, you're absolutely right. The fact that Mike Tomlin chose to intervene and use the words that he used, what a powerful statement that was. To me, that does change a lot. I'm not here to give you original information. We all know this, but the fact of the matter is the fact that Myles Garrett on that Thursday night did not come out and say, Mason Rudolph called me a racial slur, that's why I did what I did. The fact that it took him a week or whatever it was, to me, that was as damning as could possibly be. And the fact that he is still doing interviews saying the same thing over and over again is astounding to me. And the media coverage it has received, especially from a certain four-letter network, to me, is absolutely appalling. If I were a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I don't think I would ever talk again with anyone from that network. I mean that. It's been absolutely astounding.
You know what,
Bob,
Josh?
I think that there's something else now that you push this story forward, and that's this lawsuit by Mason Rudolph. However frivolous it is, however, it won't amount to anything in terms of him receiving anything or getting anything. What it will do, it'll force some people to be deposed under oath. And I think that can be the end game to all of this. People both in the NFL office and Myles Garrett in particular. Mason Rudolph might not collect it, he won't collect it. It'll probably get thrown out because it is frivolous, because it's very hard to prove defamation. That being said, though, some people are going to be made to talk under oath, and that's going to be the end game that I think a lot of people are looking for.
And Josh, to underscore your point about the biased coverage on behalf of ESPN and Outside the Lines, I'll name them all. Ryan Smith, Michelle Steele, Jeremy Schaap. I think the other one was Ariel Alhawane, were the guys who were on the panel, the people on the panel. What they did was they agendized their coverage in two regards. They decided that they wanted this to be true. They decided that they wanted to believe that Mason Rudolph said it. They decided that they wanted to advance the image of Myles Garrett at the expense of Mason Rudolph's. And part of the reason they did that, go back and watch it again on ESPN.com and listen to the tone of what they said. They were chapped that the Steelers and Rudolph didn't comment in advance of the piece airing, and they used that as part of the reason why. All their responses were based around, well, Garrett is talking again, Rudolph and the Steelers haven't. I don't know why Rudolph and the Steelers had to talk again when they were on the record already as denying it, but because they didn't comment for their piece, all three of the panelists responded negatively about Rudolph and the Steelers as if to say, well, if you're not going to talk to us, we're going to make your guy look bad, and that's shameful.
It is shameful, and when I saw it, I couldn't even watch it. First couple minutes, that was enough, and I turned it off just because I wanted to hear what the reaction was. Josh, I want to ask you about the NFL moving forward here. Do you think they would actually capitalize on this as something that they could, you know, kind of, Browns-Steelers coming up, primetime game in November, you may want it that way. Do you think they would do that, even though they're probably shaking their head about this whole situation?
I think for the most part, they probably want this situation to go away. The Steelers are pretty good for ratings as it is, but I don't think they need to try to capitalize on it. Colin and I were just talking about it before we went on the air. We're all waiting for Steelers-Browns week 1 or week 7 or whenever it may be. Of course we are. Of course this adds some spice. I don't want to call it a rivalry because I think the Browns have beaten them about 4 times in the last 15 years. That's not an exaggeration. I don't think the NFL will try to push that. In fact, after the Steelers and Bengals playoff game a few years ago that was completely out of control, I think they had nothing but 1 o'clock games for the next 3 years. I don't really think the league wanted to push that, but it's unavoidable now.
Yeah, I think because of their past history with how they handle the Bengals and Steelers, they very well might do it. They might be wise to wait until later in the year because by then, who knows, maybe Roethlisberger's elbow explodes again and Rudolph is actually playing for the Steelers. But I look at the whole setup between the two, and I think that it's funny to me that Myles Garrett is trying to diffuse this while exacerbating it by saying he just wants to apologize to Mason Rudolph, which again is part of the reason why I don't believe it.
It wasn't a racial thing
The bigger-
either, which I couldn't believe it.
He called you a stupid N-word, but you just want to apologize to him.
I think
Come
the
on.
bigger problem is there are people in this world who are really, really oppressed and that things happen racially and people are held down by that. And if this turns out to be frivolous and fruitless and it's a hollow claim, it really hurts the causes of people who have legitimate claims of being of people coming out against them and people discriminate against them because of their race. And that doesn't do anything to further race relations in this country or in football at all.
Jesse Smollett, we're due for a break. We'll take it right now. I want to remind you, though, the Auto Show is like Pro Football Scouting Combine. You see what everyone can do, and then you make your pick. Well, make your pick now and save during #1 Cochran Hyundai's Auto Show After Party. Get double on your Auto Show bonus cash plus $1,000 over KBB for your trades. 3 years complimentary maintenance on a new 2020 only at #1 Cochran Hyundai Monroeville and the spacious new South Hill store. Hurry in. It ends March 2nd. We're coming back with Penguin Talk next.